And good morning. It is Labor Day 2012, a day of non-working for most of the working population of this country, which I read numbers about 150 million workers. Thought I read that number earlier today. Unfortunately, well, it's a great thing for those who have a job. Not a great economy for those folks who don't have a job, particularly if you're newly looking for one in an economy which is not creating enough new jobs on a monthly basis. And by the way, just to put that into perspective for you, about 3 years ago, I shared with you here at Stickham.com a report, a research report done by the Kauffman Foundation of Kansas City. And in that report 3 years ago, I would like to see a revision to that, but 3 years ago, they said that our economy needed to create 300,000 new jobs every month for a period of 36 months, 3 years, in order for our country to get back to the sense of normalcy that we were living 3-4 years ago. 300,000 jobs a month for 36 months. Create new jobs. Not happening. From the research that I have done in the last 28 months, we have only been averaging 150,000 new jobs, newly created jobs every month. And in many months, unfortunately, since the beginning of this year, in the last 8 months, that number has been considerably less than 150,000. So I'm not quite sure if that 150,000 jobs per month, the data that I was reading, researching, is all that accurate. But it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we are not creating enough new jobs. And new jobs are created when, for the most part, when new businesses are started. New business startups has always been the major source of new job creation. And that's not a surprising idea, because when you are a new business starting up, you need folks, and it starts with job number one is that entrepreneur, maybe like yourself, who wants to start a business. You are creating for yourself job number one. Many of the experts will say that a failure of the entrepreneur starting a business rests in the idea that they are trying to create a job for themselves, and that's the scope of their thinking. I will disagree with those folks because I can use myself as an example. I started building David's Barter Community almost 3 years ago. And in that time, in building that community, not only have I created things that I must do every day, that's a job, I have to do it every day, in order to keep our community going and growing, but I can't do it all myself. So along the way, I have outsourced that work that needs to be done, for the most part, the technology aspect, because our community, our social marketing, social network community, as you well know, if you visited our community, is built upon a strong foundation of social marketing, not just social media. I have to emphasize that fact because it's not just about social media, although I understand how important social media is to the equation. I don't have to look any further beyond Stickham.com. And in the almost 4 years that I have been on Stickham, more than 2 million page views have been created thanks to great folks like yourself who take the time out of your day when there's so many choices. Choices right at stickam.com. Other choices how you can use your time, and you choose to come and listen to Small Biz David talk about now starting a business. Stickam.com is the most dynamic social media that I use. Absolutely, no question, because I can see people. Well, I can't actually see you, but I know you're there based upon the numbers that I see. And then after each broadcast that I do, I go to see if I have been able to motivate you to go to davidsbarter.com, either to register as a member of the community, to create a complimentary community marketing profile for yourself so that you can communicate with other members of the community based upon that profile, based upon the small business keywords that you use in that profile. And then the ultimate test is whether or not I have provided the motivation and inspiration for you to create a community landing page for yourself and start your business. It's pretty simple. So I can really measure pretty much the impact of my broadcast at stickam.com and the impact of stickam.com as a social media. I attempt to do the same thing, but to a much lesser degree with my presence on Facebook. Facebook.com/smallbusinessinformation. That is a group, that's a fan page that I created at Facebook over 3 years ago. And so my presence on Facebook, actually, I don't go to Facebook every day. I don't need to. For me. Not necessarily for you, but because of the technology, the social network technology that Curtis has developed for our community, everything that I do at Stickam or at YouTube or at Google Plus goes to, well, ultimately it ends up also at on a landing page. Every broadcast that I do, be it Stickam, be it YouTube, ends up as a landing page somewhere in our community. You can do the same things for yourself by having a landing page in our community. And I'm making a landing page complimentary to 10,000 entrepreneurs who want to start a business right now. Now you might say, well, David, why are you making it complimentary? I'm making it complimentary because I made a commitment to the Startup America Partnership almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years at the end of January, this coming January, that I would provide any resource that I possibly could, can, will, to help get America started again. My contribution is done in the form of the development of our community and making available a complimentary landing page. I want you to get started. I want you to come up with a good business idea. I want our community to be a very, very powerful place where people will come to the community for all the activity they know that is going on in the community. It's not just about telling your friends on Facebook what is going on in your life. It's about conducting business in our community. There is a large amount of business conducted every day in our community, and it gets larger and larger every day. It gets larger by folks like yourself participating, registering to become a member, communicating with other members of the community. The only way you can communicate with other members of the community is by creating a community marketing profile, complimentary, for yourself, and using the messaging system that we have developed, unique and proprietary to our community. You don't communicate with other members of the community by email unless you so decide with that other individual or individuals that you want to communicate by email. That's okay. We just don't support email on our servers, either incoming email or outgoing email. We don't support it. We want folks to communicate. We want the information in our community to be kept in our community. We want privacy and security. That is upmost in our thinking. That's why we have gone to extra lengths, committed extra resources to make sure that our community, as best we can, is a secure and private environment for the members of that community. So we don't support email. Email, I have to say that email is a very, very efficient means of communication. No question about it. And millions of people use email. But email isn't the most secure way to communicate, period. And if you've been following me for any time at Stickham, you know that it was about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years yet, that I shared with you some very, very scary information that with the very best database of email in this country, there were over, well, I don't know, I actually haven't read the number, but there were millions upon millions of email addresses stolen. And stolen from the company that databased them, but there were 8 companies on the very first list of 30 companies that I read that had their customers' email addresses stolen from this company that is as good as there is in terms of the technology that they use for email. My personal email address was on 8 of those companies that had the email addresses stolen. People that I chose to do business with, and that's why I gave them my email address. My bank at the time, no longer my bank at the time was on that list. The largest retailer in this country, department store retailer, my name was on their list. Best Buy, there were 8 companies. And so I said, you know what, this is not good. So I quit opening any email that I got from those companies. I just stopped. They were companies that I chose to do business with and gave them my address. But the fact that my address had been stolen by some hackers who could create what is called a phishing, P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G scam, a phishing scam, where they would design an email that looked like it was coming from my service provider, my retailer, my bank, but in fact it wasn't. They had created it, and they attempt to get information from me thinking that I'm giving it to my choice, but they were taking that information and actually using it, potentially faking it, and using it for their own reasons. Not a very safe environment. I know for a fact that since I made that decision, I have gotten 3 different emails from phishing scams. And so I was a nice enough guy to inform my service provider that this was happening. And it was very simple for me to understand that, because I could tell by the subject line that the phishing scammers created, the subject line of the email, that it indeed was not coming from my service provider. I knew that. I'd been a customer so long, I knew the kinds of marketing that they did. I knew it couldn't be right. So, the point of the matter is, inside of our community, we communicate with a messaging system. And the only way you can have access to that messaging system is by creating a complimentary profile for yourself. So first you have to register at davidsbarter.com and look for the red box, 4 fields of information, a username for yourself. I suggest that to get the most mileage out of that username, you use it as a part of creating your own brand or relating to the product and service that you're trying to sell, to market inside the community. And that brand identity is very, very important. So needless to say, my username in the community is Small Biz David. So one way to communicate with me, become a registered member, send me a message. Actually, that form of communication will get my attention as quickly as anything else, including the telephone, text messaging. I do a lot of text messaging, but not with a lot of people. There's only a half a dozen people that I actually have any kind of text messaging relationship with. So that's how we communicate inside the community with a messaging system. You have to register. You have to have a community marketing profile. Okay, so give a username. Now, we do in fact ask for your email address when you are registering. We only use that email address for one purpose, and one purpose only. That's to generate an email to you that, not on our servers, actually, it's coming from my service provider. We send you an email, and the purpose is to try to understand that you are a real person giving us a real email address. And the way that we check that out is, if you get the email address, there's information inside of that email that is important for you. So we will know if you've responded to that. That's the only time that we use that email address, and we will never use it unless we ask your permission, if it's okay to email to you. And the likelihood of that happening is not very likely. I would rather send you a message, because I know that message is going to members of the community, and in fact will not be intercepted by anyone outside of the community. That's why we do it that way. Okay, and then the other 2 fields of information is just you creating a password for yourself and you verifying that password. That gets you going. The next step would be to create a community marketing profile. 6 fields of information. None of it is what I would call private information. We don't want to have private information hosted on our servers. The reason that we don't, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the primary reason is we are liable. We, the community me, is liable for that information that is on our servers. And if it's private information and that information gets breached, if someone hacks us and steals that information, I have to show that I have taken all the precautionary measures to protect that information, that private information on our servers. That's something that I really decided I did not want to do. So I just don't collect private information. Your address, your phone number, your date of birth, those things are not important to the livelihood and growth and development of our community, so I don't want them. I don't need them. Keep in mind, if anybody ever asks you for that information on any server, at Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever, if anybody has used that information or gathered that information, if you read their terms of service, somewhere it's going to say that they are allowed to use that information that is gathered. That's the trade-off that you make. If you're going to use their technology, if you're going to use Facebook's technology within their community, LinkedIn, if you're going to tweet, the trade-off is that the information that they collect from you they can use for whatever reasons. Once again, that's an area that I don't want to have to be questioned on and be challenged on. How am I using that information? I'm going to terminate, I'm going to stop this